Hi everyone, we'll get started in just a minute, letting folks join. Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today for NOAA's Climate and Societal Interactions Nature-Based Solutions webinar series, second episode, Considerations for Integrating Nature-Based Solutions in Planning. My name is Aaliyah Mejias. I'm a Canals Fellow with the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program. Next slide, please. And before we begin, we'll just go over some quick housekeeping notes. If you can hear me and see the presentation, you are good to go. Unfortunately, we are not able to support folks troubleshoot their technical issues, but we do recommend rejoining if you can't hear the broadcast or have any issues connecting. We do offer captioning as well. You just have to toggle that on. And if you have any questions for the speakers, please submit using the question function. And finally, this is being recorded, so we will be sending that out to all registrants and posting it on our website as well for later viewing. Next slide. So today we will provide a brief overview of our webinar series as well as the NOAA programs that fund the featured work. The bulk of the time will be dedicated to our presenters to share their funded projects, and we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. Next slide, please. And this 5-part webinar series features projects funded by the Climate and Societal Interactions Division, or CSI, and programs focused on the research and equitable application of nature-based solutions, which are actions to protect, sustainably manage, or restore natural or modified ecosystems to address societal challenges, simultaneously providing benefits for people and the environment. Each webinar episode will feature projects funded by CSI programs that demonstrate the diverse contributions to the body of nature-based solutions, research and practice of implementation, as well as provide time for the audience to ask the presenters questions. Our goal for this webinar series is to increase awareness of recent and current research on nature-based solutions funded by CSI, as well as provide the opportunity to improve understanding, application, and evidence generation for decision-making to reduce climate risk through nature-based solutions. Each webinar has a different focus, so we hope you'll join us each month, but we're really excited to have so many registrants representing a variety of sectors with us today. So thank you. And with that, let's shift to Jeannie Bay to learn more about NOAA, CSI, and the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program. Jeannie?
Thanks, Aaliyah. Next slide, please. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have such a wide attendance for the second episode of our webinar series on NOAA's Climate and Societal Interactions Division's contribution to the world of nature-based solutions. My name is Jeannie Bay, and I'm a program specialist supporting the CAP program. We wanted to start off by first providing some situational awareness of where our division sits within NOAA. NOAA is within the Department of Commerce, and the NOAA Climate Program Office, or CPO, is hosted under the Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Line Office. Next slide, please. The Climate and Societal Interactions Division within CPO supports research that seeks to generate the knowledge, tools, and institutional networks that enhance society's capacity to anticipate, plan for, and adapt to climate impacts. Our focus complements the work of the physical science research and development portfolio across NOAA by using insights from social science research to interpret, synthesize, and apply climate data analysis and observations. Programmatically, this is what CSI looks like today. It is a science policy research and engagement enterprise that brings to NOAA an emphasis on individuals and communities and the ongoing decisions involved in the process of adapting to climate, both here and abroad. CSI is home to two unique programs, the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program, or CAP, formerly known as the Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessments Program, as well as the Adaptation Sciences Program. We'll now provide a little bit of background about each program within CSI to help you get a better understanding of the research approaches and the role each program plays in the projects being presented today. Next slide, please. So the mission of the CAP program is to advance equitable adaptation through sustained regional research and community engagement. We accomplish this by supporting a network of regional teams through competitively awarded 5-year cooperative agreements in multi-state regions across the US. Teams are composed of experts and local partners working across a diverse range of sectors and with urban and rural communities and local, state, and tribal governments on their cross-sectoral climate adaptation needs. In recent years, the network has begun funding more directly on equity and tackling the complex compound stressors, both climate and socioeconomic, faced by communities, and has focused more attention to frontline communities in search of this type of expertise and partnership. On the right of this slide here is our ring graphic, which depicts the CAP process, including the establishment of trust between partners, needs being defined by the community, research designed to meet the needs of the community, participation by the community being critical to success, and benefits being received by and useful to the community. It is with these actions and outcomes that novel climate solutions are developed. The CAP program represents long-term investment toward this mission, as the program is 25 years old and our vision is to continue investing in existing regions and expanding into areas that are not yet covered by the program for the long haul. Next slide, please. So here is a map of our current CAP network of regional teams. The 13 CAP teams that make up our network are depicted in solid colors. These teams have been working in their regions, some over many years, to build relationships and produce collaborative research and community-relevant adaptation approaches. We are working hard to reach full national coverage, but that is largely dependent on congressional appropriations. One project you'll hear from today is presented by our Pacific team. So as I mentioned prior, CAP teams determine the research they engage in alongside the communities they serve, taking into account the unique environmental, socioeconomic, and cultural variables of their regions. CAP approaches nature-based solutions work by applying our programmatic level lens of integrating social and physical sciences and considering complex compounding hazards and benefits. This holistic lens allows for challenging more conventional approaches to NBS that may be solely focused on engineering and design, and rather emphasizes the importance of considering societal and community level variables. Significantly, CAP's work spans both coastal and inland communities, making our investments in NBS distinct from many other NBS-focused programs at NOAA that are concentrated in coastal zones. NBS work funded through CAP can be loosely categorized into these buckets here, which include informing decision support and community planning, identifying trade-offs and co-benefits, advancing equity and workforce development, as well as analysis and evaluation of projects once implemented. More specifically, CAP has funded work developing community-wide green infrastructure master plans, examining the intersection of extreme heat, human health, and nature-based solutions, conducting vulnerability assessments for stormwater managers, and transforming vacant, neglected, and underutilized land into a matrix of green infrastructure, just to name a few projects. During this series, you'll hear from some of the researchers themselves who helped carry out projects like these. From here, I will turn things over to my colleague Bhaskar from CAP's sister program, Adaptation Sciences.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Like Jeannie mentioned, my name is Bhaskar, just like NASCAR. I co-manage a research program called Adaptation Science, or ADSci for short. As Jeannie mentioned before, the ADSci program is a sister program of CAP and was established in 2021. 3 legacy programs, SCOCA, SARP, and IRAP, were melded together to create the current ADSci program. The goal of the ADSci program is to advance the knowledge, methods, and framework to move society beyond incremental adaptation to a more widespread, connected, and transformative adaptation pathways. The 2 key objectives of the program are: 1, to develop an understanding of key drivers and conditions that shape and enable adaptation. Second being identifying and promoting opportunities for the use of climate information to support preparedness and plan adaptation. Adaptation, the Adaptation Science Program prides itself on excelling at blending research, partnerships, and engagement. AdSci supports work conducted both within the US, an example being co-leading the DOT partnership called the Climate Smart Transportation, and outside the US by leveraging Department of State funding on projects such as the Island-led Resilience 2030 and NOAA's Blue Carbon Inventory project. ADSA also provides technical collaboration and capacity building by leveraging funding in areas such as fisheries. The program is called CAFA and Coastal Resilience. ADSI encourages and supports research that generate knowledge, tools, and institutional network to enhance society's ability to anticipate, plan for, and adapt to climate impacts. In short, we take a systems approach and strategically look at compound events and their cascading impacts. We shape and implement our program priorities by participating in various federal work groups and project-specific cross-agency collaboration. A good example in the NBS space is a FEMA guide called Building Community Resilience with NBS, and the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which is basically a partnership between Canada, US, and Mexico. The effort was called Monitoring the Efficacy of Nature-Based Solutions, Proposed Methodology and Indicator. NBS is a space that ADSI has invested in the past. Moving forward, we would like to focus more in this space by amplifying our investments in the future by using past work as a springboard. This actually complements NOAA's broader work in science, service, and stewardship, and the program carries out this work by supporting a portfolio of interdisciplinary research and focus partnership. Leah?
Thanks, Bhaskar and Jeannie. I appreciate those overviews. So as we know, climate change can impact communities differently. So planning decisions to adapt should be grounded in place-based priorities. This webinar episode will feature two projects that consider different approaches to adaptation planning: cost-effective climate equity informed, multi-objective analysis, and natural capital informed. And our first presentation will be by Jessica Eisma, who will be sharing her AdSci funded project that looked at how Houston quantifies the potential of nature-based solutions in urban flood reduction and sought to build community understanding and support. Jessica Eisma is an assistant professor of water resources engineering in the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Texas at Arlington. Her research focuses on opportunities and barriers in the use of nature-based solutions for stormwater management in underserved urban coastal communities and for municipal water treatment. She is particularly interested in the human element of water resources engineering and the cyclic nature of human infrastructure impacts. In her free time, Jessica likes going for long walks while listening to audiobooks, cheering on Dallas Trinity FC, and playing hobby board games with her family. Welcome, Jessica, and thank you so much for being with us today. And as a reminder for participants, please use the question function to submit any questions you have about her work. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Aaliyah. As Aaliyah said, I am Jessica Eisman, and today I'll be talking to you about our Adaptation Sciences funded program. Next. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce you to the project team. We have faculty from 4 different universities across also 4 different regions. Our not regions, 4 different areas of expertise working on this project. We have civil engineering, anthropology, public planning and policy, and then also disaster management. So next. So I'm gonna get used to saying next. As this is a really community-focused grant, we would not be able to do all of the wonderful work that we have done without the support of our partners. So foremost, I want to highlight the Northeast Houston Redevelopment Council. They are our primary community partners, and we've also had support from the University of Houston, Harris County Flood Control District, various offices within the city of Houston listed, and then also a local landscape architecture firm called Asakura Robinson. Next. So to provide a little bit of context, background information about Northeast Houston, Northeast Houston was initially developed around the 1930s on what at the time was the outskirts of Houston. But now as Houston's grown, it's only about 10 minutes from downtown, so very, very central to the Houston area. It is historically an African American community, and it led the forefront of the fight to integrate Houston ISD Independent School District. And so they have in this community a really long and proud tradition of civic institution and civic action. Next. So these are a few photos from these communities. They have railroad tracks bordering on three sides and then also running across the center of their communities. And then also a lot of these lots in these neighborhoods are larger lots, like half an acre lot with primarily older homes on them. Next. So Northeast Houston is particularly prone to flooding, in part because the neighborhoods are served primarily by inadequate stormwater infrastructure. These are poorly maintained open stormwater drains. As you can see in this figure, most of the open stormwater drains that are deemed inadequate, the color shown in black here, are located in these green and yellow communities. These green and yellow communities are the ones where over 85% of residents are minorities. And so you can definitely see that the concentration of these inadequate stormwater drains are in underserved communities generally. And then by one count, over 88% of Houston's open stormwater drains are located in African American communities. So this is very much evidence of I don't know if I want to say tradition, but habit of underserving these communities. Next. So this here is a photo of a typical street in Northeast Houston. As you can see, there's no curb, there's no gutter, there's no sidewalks. The streets are lined on both sides, as you can see, by small open stormwater drainage ditches on each side of the street. These are actually in pretty good shape compared to some that I've seen. You know, they're fairly cleaned out, but as you'll notice they are fairly small. And then you can see in this photo, the homes are set fairly far back from the road. You can't even see many houses in this photo, but they are there. Next. So these neighborhoods experience fairly frequent flooding. The community likes to talk about their like average, Saturday morning flood because why not? It's Saturday, I guess. But during Hurricane Harvey, their flooding issues were, as you can imagine, quite extreme. So over 64% or approximately 64% of the homes in the area flooded, and the floodwaters took about 4 days to recede. And so this was absolutely devastating for the community. And I think about 5,000 residents left and never came back. There has been new residents moving into the area to replace those, but the community is definitely changing in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. Next. Okay, so what are we trying to do? Broadly, we're trying to develop a community-supported green stormwater infrastructure plan for the Garden super neighborhoods. Super neighborhood is just what they call neighborhood communities in Houston. So what does this involve overall? We're working very closely with interested community members and local government leaders to identify and incorporate their needs and wants into our planning exercises. And we are putting all of these planning exercises into like a master final GSI plan that we are also conducting a cost benefit analysis for. And the idea is the hopes of the community is that they can use some of this research, some of this planning to then go and secure funding for GSI projects in their neighborhoods. So throughout this process, we are interacting a lot with community members at community events and interviews to help identify also social barriers to the adoption of GSI in these underserved communities. Next. So one of the things that we heard from the community members when we were first writing our adaptation sciences proposal was they told us that they wanted us to help them initiate social change in their communities and to increase support for GSI in their neighborhoods. The community leaders knew about GSI and had an interest in it, but they wanted, more residents to kind of, jump on the support for that. So this meant that kind of from day one, we've been really focused on getting out into the community, attending outreach events, giving talks at community meetings and their monthly super neighborhood meetings, joining any sort of outreach event that would be appropriate that would let us get in touch with the community members. We're also conducting semi-structured interviews with community members to sit down and get a little bit more detailed understanding of what their perception is of GSI, and then also um, whether or not they can see GSI and how they see GSI as part of a solution for their stormwater management issues in their neighborhoods. So through these interviews that we've done, we've heard, I would say, a lot of the same story, and a lot of that comes down to residents in these neighborhoods are very, very skeptical of outside actors coming in and trying to do something. So they're very used to people coming in and saying all the right things and then either not following through or um, not listening to the community, not taking the community's perspective into account. So they're quite skeptical of outsiders coming in and trying to take action in the communities. So one of the other things that comes up a lot is that this, as a result, the best way then to actually engage and interact with folks effectively in these communities is kind of through the initiative of the community leaders. If you can go find the community leaders first, talk to the community leaders and get their input, get their guidance, let them lead you through the community, then you'll have that contact point of somebody who the community recognizes, who the community appreciates, and who they respect. And it helps you a lot in actually trying to engage effectively with communities who have a history of, mistrust between the government and themselves, generally speaking. Um, so one of the things that we have done that I would say was kind of the most fun, also the most impactful, was a rain garden demonstration workshop. Next. And this rain garden demonstration workshop was held in collaboration with Keiji Asakura, who is a principal at Asakura Robinson, a local landscape architecture firm. And so we were able to conduct this rain garden workshop right at the community gardens there in the neighborhood. Next. So we completed this rain garden over 2 work days and had about 10 to 15 residents come out and help us build this rain garden. Not everyone was working, some were just cheering us on. But we were also had about 5 students from the University of Houston come join us and also help dig and move branches and whatnot. And these students were there working on a graphic design project, or to gather information for a graphic design project where they were focusing on developing rain garden focused graphic materials, so that they were developing content that could be used for a rain garden campaign. Next. So through this activity, we were able to better understand the potential for GSI to serve as an avenue for residents to become more engaged with infrastructure and to see that they can actually impact their futures by engaging in infrastructure design, creation, and management activities. This concept is quite different from what we're used to, where we're not so much focused on the government providing infrastructural solutions to our problems, but we're realizing that as citizens, we can take control or take actions that can control our local infrastructure, such as by engaging in small-scale green stormwater infrastructure. Next. Okay, so that's kind of all the social piece of our work. This is more into the modeling part of our work. So we had an existing integrated hydraulic and hydrologic model of Houston. So what we did was we clipped out just the area that we were interested in order to use that for modeling the impact of green stormwater infrastructure in these neighborhoods. So what we did initially was we ran a bunch of preliminary simulations with the National Stormwater Calculator to see what the potential impact of different GSI combinations on reducing stormwater runoff in these neighborhoods. And then we presented these results to the community members at at a meeting, and then we talked about what they liked about what they saw, what they didn't like about what they saw, and through their feedback, they selected 5 different types of GSI that they were interested in based on not only what their understanding of the needs of their community, what their community would like to see, and then also the results that we were able to show them about potential runoff reduction associated with each different type of GSI in their neighborhood. So overall, they selected porous pavement, green roofs, rain gardens, street planters, and rain barrels as their primary green stormwater infrastructure types that they were interested in. So these types of GSI is what we proceeded to then model with this larger integrated hydraulic and hydrologic model. Next. So these watersheds here are the 2 that are included in the model because the Trinity Gardens, Houston Gardens, Cashmere Gardens neighborhoods, they straddle the line between the Halls Bayou and the Hunting Bayou. So both of these watersheds are represented in our model. Next. So I'm not going to read all of these, but this is the list of simulations that we are running. As you can see, we're running simulations for different combinations of storm durations, return periods, climate change scenarios for the current climate, year 2050, year 2100, and then also several different GSI implementation levels from no GSI, 25%, 50%, and 100%. Next. So this is just a very brief overview of some of the results that we've gotten from our simulations. So here we are looking at a figure for the 24-hour storm of 10-year storm, the 24-hour 10-year storm duration. Here you can see that implementing green stormwater infrastructure has a lot of potential to reduce the flood depth. You're looking here at the flood depth reduction in inches. So overall, across the board, we are able to significantly reduce flood depths. We definitely see higher flood depth reduction for the 100% GSI scenario, but we also see fairly high flood depth reductions for the 50% GSI scenario. And we can see here that that reduction is not linear, right? So we get already, for example, for the 50% GSI scenario, we have in this upper upper right corner, you can see there's 8.2 inches of flood depth reduction, but if you're implementing at 100% GSI, that's only an extra 9.6 inches, or an extra, like 1.4 inches of reduction. So we're definitely not looking at linear improvement here in flood depth reduction. So we are looking here also at a comparison between the current flood depth reduction for the current climate scenarios and your 2050 climate scenarios. And we see that currently there is a lot more potential to reduce flooding at the current rainfall rates than there will be in year 2050. And as you'll see a little bit more on the next slide, a lot of that is because we're expecting rainfall depths to increase for the 10-year storm in year 2050. Next. So this is a nice figure that sort of summarizes all the simulation results that we've had so far. Here on the y-axis, we have a change in the accumulated stream flow volume percentage, change in peak stream flow percentage, and then we have on each of these figures combinations of all the GSI implementation levels for all the different climate scenarios. So one thing that you need to understand in contextualizing these results is that global climate models show rainfall increasing in Houston. However, when we actually did our analysis, we found when we downscaled, regionalized our analysis, we found that rainfall depths are going to be increasing, are expected to increase for the 2, the 5, and the 10-year storm. Not going to see much change for the 25-year storm, and then actually are expected to decrease for the 50, 100, and 500-year storms. And this was surprising to us at first, but we also found another paper from the region that found a similar finding that we're actually expected to have a reduction in really large storms by the year 2050, 2100. Okay, so now that we've established that, what do we actually see here? We see that green stormwater infrastructure does have an ability to reduce the amount of runoff we're seeing, the amount of peak stream flow we're seeing, but that especially for the 2-year storm and the 5-year storm, that these smaller scale green stormwater infrastructures that were selected by the community are not able to capture all of that additional runoff that we are expecting as a result of these increases um, in the 2-year storm, the 5-year storm, 10-year storms. So what we need then is some additional stormwater measures. So as I said, we modeled, simulated the GSI that the community indicated they were most interested in, and these were largely smaller scale GSI. So in order to actually protect against future increases in flood risk as a result of the anticipated increases in rainfall through climate change, we will need to couple these smaller scale GSI with maybe larger scale solutions like constructed wetlands and whatnot. Next.
So
Okay, so
Jessica, sorry to interrupt, but we are almost on time. So if you want to wrap up your final thoughts, thank you.
okay, thank you. Yes. So just quickly, conclusions and recommendations. We generally found that the community is very interested in adaptation planning and GSI, but they're skeptical that anything is going to happen, right? And so that's where we need to really make sure that we're working with the community from the start and listening to them. We heard a lot of stories about, outside groups coming in and talking to them like they wanted to hear what the community said, but then not actually implementing what the community said. They had their own ideas. They did their own ideas. Um, and that the GSI planning that we did with community leaders ensured that the GSI types that were selected would be welcomed by residents and they were interested in them, but they, as we saw, they weren't necessarily the most effective types of GSI. And so that if we want to use GSI to increase infrastructural citizenship, people's engagement with their infrastructure, it's a great idea, but we also need to plan for additional measures, whether that be larger scale GSI, like I said, constructed wetlands, or coupling nature-based solutions with some more traditional solutions as well. Next. So I will leave you with that. This is my contact information if you're interested in getting in touch or have more questions. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was awesome. And sorry for rushing you through the end, but we'll
No
have
worries.
some questions at the end. So our next presentation and project is funded by the Pacific RISA, or the Pacific CAP team. And this team will provide an overview of their ongoing 3-part project to create information needed for a natural capital approach to climate adaptation. And Kirsten Olson is a professor of ecological economics at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Some of her current research projects focus on building an evidence base for nature-based climate adaptation in islands through participatory evaluation, such as this project, and valuing the non-market benefits of ecosystems, as well as natural capital accounting. She was a co-author of the 5th National Climate Assessment and is on the authorship team of the NCA 6. She was recently confirmed to the City and County of Honolulu Climate Change Commission. Welcome, Kirsten. And we also have An Nembega, who is a research assistant and Master's of Science candidate at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, dedicated to advancing climate resilience through the monitoring and evaluation of nature-based solutions in Hawaii and Pacific Islands. Her work focuses on fostering deeper understanding of socio-ecological systems, evaluating nature-based solutions programs, and assessing resilience in frontline communities. An is passionate about connecting with communities, listening to their stories, and immersing in diverse cultures, which informs her work. Welcome, An. And I'll remind everyone again that questions you all have for our speakers can be submitted through our question function. But Kirsten and An, please go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here today. Thanks everyone for joining us. So we're part of the Pacific CAP program, Pacific RISA, and our project is looking at trying to incorporate natural capital into decision making on the island of Kauai. Next slide, please. We've had a really terrific team of interdisciplinary scientists working on this project. So Anna and I are going to present today, but we've also had a couple of students come and do internship projects for their engineering degrees. Next slide, please. So natural capital accounting provides a comprehensive way to measure the value of nature in an equitable and beneficial way. So understanding when and where ecosystem-based adaptation works and how to measure its effectiveness has become increasingly important, especially in island ecosystems like ours, where the impacts of climate change are in our face, they're felt strongly. Everybody here is a frontline community. So our project objectives are to co-develop evaluation plans for nature-based solutions that are occurring on our islands now. We are seeking to really co-produce this knowledge with groups implementing nature-based solutions in order to advance the science of monitoring and evaluation, such that we can inform adaptive management for ecosystem-based adaptation practices. Next slide. So ecosystem-based adaptation is a subset of nature-based solutions that integrates the use of biodiversity and ecosystem services into climate adaptation strategies. And here in Hawaii, where indigenous practices have long coexisted with nature, ecosystem-based adaptation is not just about protecting ecosystems, it's about enhancing the well-being of local communities and maintaining their deep connection to land and water. In recent years, there's been a growing interest in ecosystem-based adaptation as a tool to address both ecological and social challenges, driven in part by federal funding and a rising awareness of the need for sustainable long-term solutions. However, despite this interest, there remains a gap in kind of the knowledge base and how we monitor and evaluate these efforts, particularly in island environments. So we still need to understand when and where ecosystem-based adaptation is effective and develop evaluation guidelines that are suited to our local context, including incorporating local and indigenous knowledge. So our work focuses on 3 case studies, each with unique monitoring and evaluation needs, and we'll be focusing on these in the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to Anne to take us through those cases.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for the quick introduction. So next slide, please. So earlier on in the activities, our first step in our work was to identify key organizations and communities to partner with. We dedicated significant amount of time speaking to various stakeholders on the ground, guided by our definition of ecosystem-based adaptation. And through this scoping process, we discovered that many organizations didn't initially view their efforts as climate adaptation. Instead, their primary focus was on restoring ecosystems for ecological and social purposes, with any climate resilience benefits seen as secondary. This insight allowed us to highlight the potential climate adaptation benefits inherent in their work, which we will explore further in the upcoming case studies I'll be sharing shortly. So we were able to demonstrate how their efforts were actively contributing to broader climate resilience goals, even if that wasn't their initial intent. Building trust and fostering strong relationships during this phase required substantial amount of time and resources, but it laid the critical foundation for meaningful collaboration and long-term successes. So on your right, you see these are some of the organizations that we talked to, and the first 3 are the ones that we worked with. Next slide, please. Our scoping led us to working with 3 organizations, Kuwaisi Farm, which focuses on sustainable aquaculture in the Numilu Fish Pond. Malama Huleia focuses on a biocultural restoration approach centered on native ecosystem restoration and invasive species management. And the Waipa Foundation works on watershed and coastal restoration to address food production, and flood resilience. Each organization approaches ecosystem-based adaptation from a different perspective, and we were able to conduct a thorough needs assessment through interviews with the organization and participated in workdays to get an understanding of what is happening exactly on the ground and how we can best be of help in their monitoring and evaluation needs. Next slide, please. So just a quick introduction to our first case study, the Nomulu Fish Pond, which is managed by Kauai Sea Farm. This study was majorly conducted by Lisbeth. And Nomulu Fish Pond holds both ecological and cultural significance to the people of Hawaii as it integrates traditional aquacultural practices with modern techniques to support biodiversity and local food systems. So the problem here was during the winter months, the fish pond managers are kind of seeing a decline in the growth and survival rates of clams and oysters. And to help to address this, we partnered with Dr. Craig Nelson, who helped us understand the pond dynamics and develop our water sampling protocol. And at the same time, we worked closely with the fish pond managers, providing hands-on training to develop their skills in water sampling and water quality monitoring. Next slide, please. One significant finding from this study was the role of wind in water mixing within the fish ponds, which helped to distribute nutrients evenly. So this activity is not commonly seen in Hawaiian fish ponds, which usually rely on tidal movements for nutrient cycling. The phenomena is mostly observed in inland lakes in tropical regions like Africa, and however, in our case, wind was creating a reverse effect. Essentially, it was stirring water from the surface downward, which enhanced distribution of nutrients in the pond. So the challenge here was during the winter months, again, there was a decline in productivity, and it was attributed largely due to poor water mixing dynamics. Climate change is influencing wind patterns and temperatures, making it harder for natural mixing to occur. So looking ahead, to the future, climate change adds complexity through rising surface temperatures, deoxygenation, and eutrophication, which could alter food webs of these local and native fish ponds. A key recommendation here for Kauai Sea Farm was to enhance their mixing dynamics by implementing aerators and jet streams to improve intercolumn and spatial mixing dynamics. Next slide, please. So our second case study focuses on the Waipa Foundation, a community-driven organization dedicated to watershed and coastal restoration. Their efforts aim to address critical issues like flood resilience, food security, and strengthening of social capital, each of which ties to enhancing natural capital in the region. Although the evaluation is still in its early stages, our work this summer was led by Marion, who began by conducting a participatory systems mapping exercise during the Waipa festivals, where we engaged about 58 community members. This participatory approach was vital as it ensured local knowledge and experiences directly informed the evaluation. During this engagement, After this engagement, Marion developed a results chain linking ongoing stream restoration activities by the Waipa Foundation to the impacts on water quality. She then conducted statistical analysis on critical indicators such as turbidity, dissolved oxygen, and fecal bacterial levels. So the results showed improvement, particularly in reduced turbidity and fecal bacterial levels after restoration. However, there was significant fluctuations, as you can see on the graph on the screen, and these are likely due to external factors like rainfall and changing land patterns. Next slide, please. So the final case study focuses on restoration efforts at Alakoko Fish Pond in Lihue, which has faced significant challenges from mangroves. While mangroves are globally recognized for cultural protection, they pose a major threat here in Hawaii, where they endanger local wetlands ecosystems. So since 2018, Malama Huleia, a local nonprofit, has led efforts to restore the fish pond using a biocultural restoration approach, combining traditional practices with ecological restoration. So a key challenge for Malama Huleya has been to effectively monitor and translate their findings to communicate the impact of their work to funding organizations and broader conservation networks. Next slide, please. So in the initial stages of this project, I spent quite a significant amount of time building trust with key volunteers and pond managers and learning about the place and the changes that they have experienced over the years, but participating in work days. So through a participatory systems mapping process, we were able to identify key interconnections within the Alakoko systems, which helped us to establish causal links for our evaluation framework. During the mapping process, I experienced sort of a turning point following a heavy rainfall, which occurred around May 2024, and kind of caused flooding to the neighboring homes around the fish pond, and the pond had to deal with lots of debris from the flooding. So this event opened up conversations about climate change with pond managers who began to see how the restoration work ties into larger climate adaptation efforts. It was significant for me because earlier on communicating climate change was a challenge, as different pond managers kind of held diverse views about it. Next slide, please. So we then co-identified a set of resilience indicators to guide our evaluation. But a major gap I faced here was the lack of place-based indicators tailored to unique social ecological dynamics, like a Lakoko ecosystem. In recent discussions with Malama Huleya, we explored ways to improve both monitoring and data management practices. And during the review of past ecological data, we uncovered major gaps, largely due to the absence of a streamlined, simplified monitoring frameworks on the ground. Moreover, we recognized untapped potential in existing data, highlighting the need to expand on what we should measure to capture the full scope of restoration impacts. So in the coming months, to wrap up my research, I will focus on critiquing the existing data and provide recommendations and best practices for data collection and analysis so they can eloquently claim the broader resilience linkages of their work to funders and community. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, what we commonly observe in the restoration organizations is that the restoration organizations prioritized ecological data monitoring, but it's still essential to expand on this and include social indicators to holistically capture co-benefits of nature-based solutions. Secondly, social ecological systems are highly adaptive, and the rigidity of traditional monitoring and evaluation frameworks often fails to capture their complexity. Rather than adhering to rigid external standards, M&E approaches should embrace more indigenous knowledge systems and local perspectives in order to remain flexible and ensure that progress is not measured in a one-size-fits-all way. Additionally, providing training and capacity building is crucial to ensure more meaningful data is consistently collected and long-term sustainability in monitoring. We observed that the organizations lacked clear monitoring designs and well-defined hypotheses, and without these elements, the project struggled to demonstrate impact or make informed decisions around monitoring. And finally, building trust and engaging with community takes time, patience, and empathy. And it's not just about scientific data or restoration work, but it's generally understanding their needs and meeting them where they are. Thank you, and that's it from our end.
Thank you so much, Ann and Kirsten, for sharing your work. You can continue to share your screen because we're actually going to shift, or your video, because we're going to shift into question and answers that Bhaskar will kindly moderate for us. And Jessica, if you want to share your video as well. And you can all submit your questions through the questions features. And we can stop sharing screen for a little bit.
So I will be completely not objective here, but I think it's one of the best panels I've ever heard. Thank you so much, each of you, for taking your time and presenting your work. We cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much. So let's switch on to the Q&A session. Jessica, the first question, a clarifying question for a couple of folks. You use the acronym WSC. Uh, I know NOAA is notorious for acronyms, but we still wanted to see what WSC actually stands for.
The SWC is EPA's
Oh,
National Stormwater Calculator.
okay, and there was, you also mentioned some GSI solutions. Can you
Hmm.
elaborate a little bit about what those GSI solutions were and how they were simulated?
Right. So the ones selected by the community of the ones we screened were the porous pavement, street planters, rain barrels, rain gardens, and green roofs. And so these were simulated, they were initially screened in the National Stormwater Calculator, and then for our full analysis, we integrated them the based on our site design for the communities. We integrated them into the 2D hydraulic and hydrologic model. So this is a model that basically mimics the hydrology and the physics of the system. And so the idea is that by simulating them with this more integrated tool, it's called Stormwise, we can get a more accurate view of how these GSI are actually affecting the local hydrology as opposed to, the stormwater calculator or SWIM, which is a very, very bare bones sort of mathematical approach. They
So
have, yeah.
if that is the case, what weren't selected? What were not selected? That's the question that we just hot off the press. We just got
Right.
it.
What's not selected? Things like bioretention cells, constructed wetlands, vegetated swales, these types of large, I would say like larger scale um, projects were not selected, which I think they just wanted, maybe they're more interested in something that would be that they could do on their own property, whereas that's you're not going to usually build a constructed wetland on your own property, and so that's what I think requires a lot more investment than they were maybe trusting that they were going to be able to have, if that
Awesome.
makes
Thank you
sense.
so much. So Ann and Kirsten, you have you split your presentation. So this question, I'm just putting it out to you. So whoever wants to answer this, please feel free to do it. Um, One of the first questions we got was, what's a good resource to start learning about ecosystem-based adaptation? Do you have like a landmark or a keystone published paper or a great website? Either of those, if you could just pop it into the into the chat, or love to share that with folks.
There's no shortage. We'll look some up of our favorite. That this was one of the things that happened as we started on this project is there's a lot out there, and everybody's kind of relabeled things and talks about the activities relatively differently, like with different terminology, but the spirit of them are the same, right? The idea is that we're embracing the functions of nature and enhancing them in order to address some of the impacts of climate change, whether it's flooding or drought or sea level rise in our case. So yeah, Anna, do you have anything that pops to mind that you found particularly useful?
Yeah, there's a Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation website, and they have a publication that was out, I think, in 2017. So that was a really great point for me to start. So it's Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. It's I think majorly written by GIZ.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Um, Jessica, moving on to you, there is a question from Deborah from EcoAdapt. And she and I actually share the same feeling. The infrastructural citizenship that you mentioned was a very interesting term. I've never heard it myself, but I really, really appreciated being introduced to that term. It sounded like the range of community preferred options were a mix of things that would be implementable on private and public property. So the question
Mhm.
that Deborah had was, are there any funding resources available for both public and private actions in this neighborhood? And do they differ in scale and feasibility? I can repeat any part of the question if you want me to.
Are there any? So I think one of the things that the community is interested in is there's a lot of industry in this area that have large impervious areas, and so they're hoping to maybe be able to work with these industries to then encourage the industries to where they're able to install, for example, porous pavement, for example, green roofs, on their warehouses and whatnot, where they're able to. I'm not sure how much public funds are available for use on private lands like that. I know we've been working with the community to go after some EPA funding to try to actually implement some of these projects that we've analyzed in these neighborhoods, specifically ones that they've been very interested in. So, for example, creating a very GSI integrated linear park along one of their medians that's like 60 feet wide, that is just barren right now. So there, a lot of the funding I think for these types of projects is coming through the EPA right now, and there are some local organizations, some private funding that's available, but those are, I'd say, a little bit harder to get because they're harder to find out about, and there's probably so much competition. Whereas, especially working with a disadvantaged community like this, where you do have a lot of community engagement, there's a little bit better story to tell, to the EPA in terms of being able to actually obtain this types of funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. Um, Ann, I have a question that one of my colleagues actually asked, Tasha. Um, the question was, can you talk a little bit more about the lack of simplified, structured monitoring frameworks that meet on the ground realities?
That's a great question. So just to shed some light on this, the on-the-ground data collectors are kind of challenged by the what is has been put out there in terms of the frameworks or the guidelines being too comprehensive for them to kind of understand. And even on day-to-day basis, like doing restoration works and at the same time collecting data is kind of tricky. So we need to have simplified and kind of streamlined monitoring frameworks where you can be able to do restoration and at the same time collecting data without having to go an extra mile out of your daily duties to collect this data.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That is amazing. Thank you so much. Kirsten, I have a question for you. Um, Let me pull it up. So, can you talk a little bit more about, why the lack of contextual and place-based indicators matter? Is funding always the problem, or are there other things that you can actually think of?
Yeah, I mean, so what does it mean to be resilient to climate change, right? Every community is going to have a different answer to that. And to make, nobody likes doing monitoring and evaluation. Nobody wants to fund monitoring and evaluation. But if you can really define indicators that are meaningful to the communities around these projects, right? And uh, connect it to their well-being, to things they care about, um, and connect it to their knowledge systems. So, they are going to be observing different things than we may as hydrologists or ecologists or engineers. Um, and we need to have these monitoring indicators that are information to people so they can make better decisions about either how they manage the project, or let's say nearby people living nearby these sites know if they're working, not working, do they need to evacuate, not evacuate in the extreme cases, right? So, a graphic may not be impactful, but reporting how far the water level is under the one bridge in and out of the community may be.
Awesome. I do have one last question. I know we're almost at time. This is a question for all three of you, and this is my pet question. So with NBS increasingly looked to as a potential option for some communities based on your work, what would you identify as some of the key research needs or gaps for implementation? One or two quick things, if you can just, like a summary. Jessica, you want to go first?
Okay, sure. I'm going to piggyback on what Kirsten just said because it's something that we've had repeated issues with is nature-based solutions require a different type of maintenance than traditional solutions. But in our case, like City of Houston, no interest in funding maintenance. We
Hmm.
won't do maintenance. We don't want to do maintenance. But so we need better information on what kind of maintenance and how much maintenance and how to train, the folks that are actually going to be doing the maintenance so that we can actually maintain these systems.
Awesome. Kirsten?
I think I'm double on that. I think that just making sure you listen to people who aren't necessarily in power, who are affected by these projects, is a really important component.
An, you have the final word on this?
Yeah, I think funding organizations as they give out funds for restoration and maintenance, they should prioritize on monitoring and evaluation. It doesn't have to be complex, but simple impact are successes that the communities have gotten as they did the work.
Awesome. Again, we have a whole bunch of other questions that have actually come in, and we don't have the time to actually, answer them right now. But we will promise to get you all those answers, and I'll pass it on to Aaliyah for final words. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you, Kirsten and Jessica. We so appreciate you taking the time to share your work, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a reminder that we do have three more webinars left, so please register for our next one in November. The recording of this webinar will be on our website, and you can refer back to it whenever you please. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day and take care.